Welcome to another episode of Law Enforcement Today. I'm Lieutenant Ryan Shea here with Kyle, and today we're going to talk about more things law enforcement, more things that frustrate Kyle.
You know, the entire point of this series is to bridge the gap between civilian and civil servant by taking on the topics that nobody else in the mainstream media will take on. For example, Shea's new sleeve. What do you got going on over here? This is new, huh?
This is my sleeve that I've been working on and thinking about for a long time, and I finally did it. And as you notice, the American flag is prominent on that sleeve.
I was trying to figure out why he suggested that we wear polos today, and I thought maybe it was to show off these guns that he's been working on, but apparently it's to show off the ink. So, man, let's dive into it. Another day, another couple cops who Starbucks employees refuse to serve.
Yeah, we keep seeing this in the news, how Starbucks is refusing to serve law enforcement officers, and honestly, I don't understand why this keeps happening.
Now, you will hear people all day long, I'm sure we're going to see it in the comments, people who say, oh, it's not Starbucks, it's Starbucks employees. But here's the problem, man. When your leadership starts at the top down, and the corporate culture at Starbucks is one that has embraced this ideology of having an anti-law enforcement narrative. Earlier this year, they shut down more than 8,000 locations for a day to talk about anti-bias training, when the reality of it is that they were showing videos about what police brutality looks like. So it starts at the top down. What do you have? You have a little coffee over there?
I have a little coffee.
Is it by chance Battlegrounds coffee?
Maybe.
This is a pretty cool little twist to what's going on. So Eli Crane, the CEO of Bottle Breacher, former Navy SEAL sniper, served with a guy by the name of Sal DeFranco. Sal and his wife own Battlegrounds Coffee. The two of them and Mike Burke, who is the CEO of Proud Pig, and these three companies have partnered up and said that anytime any of these officers are getting screwed by Starbucks or any other company for that matter, where the company is refusing to serve them, writing pig on their cups, whatever it may be, they're sending out some bottle breachers, 50 cal bullets, 30 millimeters, turned into bottle openers, some delicious coffee that doesn't actually taste like crap like Starbucks does. Shameless plug. Starbucks is never going to sponsor this segment now, I guess. No. And some Proud Pig swag. So cool stuff, great companies. We encourage you to support them all. This is not paid product placement. We just love these guys and hang out with them, and they're good Americans. So let's talk a little bit about what's coming in January in New York City. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's a whole big storm coming in New York where instead of locking up bad dudes, rapists, suspected killers, guys building bombs to attack government entities, instead of keeping them behind bars, they are no longer going to keep them on bail. They're now going to incentivize them with movie tickets to come back for their court hearings. As a cop, what do you think?
So if you've been following law enforcement today, we spoke to a gentleman in regards to kind of the restructuring of how bonds and bail is happening in our state. And you look across the country, now we have New York kind of changing the way that they try to get somebody to appear in court. You know, incentivizing court appearances. For law enforcement, that's a difficult aspect to what we do day in and day out. You know, if we have somebody doing bad things, we do what we have to do to get them in custody and take them off the street and hopefully put them in front of a judge. But that really should happen seamlessly rather than having this disconnect where, you know, we make an arrest, the person goes to jail, and now they're out to continue to commit crimes. If you've seen across the country, we've had incidents where somebody who is out on a case that's currently in the court system now attacks an officer, now commits further crimes. How do you control that? By just incentivizing a court appearance. Now, I understand you're reducing the cost when it comes to corrections and when it comes to the cost of having somebody in a facility. They're back out, they're able to live their life, maybe be productive members of society, and then go to court to answer for what they did. But that isn't everybody.
I have a hard time believing that members of the Latin Kings and MS-13 are going to get out of jail and go be productive members of society waiting for their court appearances. I mean, it's got to be a little bit discouraging as a law enforcement officer to be putting your life on the line, saving people's lives, locking up bad guys, and then in some cases locking them back up a few days later when they probably never should have been back out on the street. What does that do to morale?
Well, we've talked about it before, right? Law enforcement officers are tasked with enforcing the laws as they're written. I don't have the ability to change the way that a law is written. I am simply tasked with enforcing that law. And I think all law enforcement officers kind of have the same perspective. Certainly we have our opinions on that, but our day-to-day job is to enforce the laws. And if the legislature wants to change the laws, change the way that things are doing, I think law enforcement will adjust. In this case, I don't know how law enforcement can adjust to thinking that if I conduct a thorough investigation and develop probable cause and place this person under arrest, 24 hours later, 12 hours later, 10 hours later, this person's going to be back out on the street. That's difficult.
All right, Lieutenant Shea, we're gonna mix things up a little bit. I'm gonna really make you uncomfortable again. Red flag laws, right? We've taken on this topic before, but now what's happening in Virginia is a totally different game. So if you guys haven't been following, Virginia's got some incoming lawmakers. No need to talk politics. You already know who's coming in January. These lawmakers have made it very clear that they are about as anti-gun as the day is long. Now, you have stated in the past that it is the job of law enforcement to enforce laws as they are written. But now what we're seeing in Virginia is that you have a rising number of sheriffs and other law enforcement officers who are saying, we have blatantly unconstitutional laws that are being put in place. We will not enforce unconstitutional laws. Now you have lawmakers in Virginia saying, well, when we come into office, we're going to deploy the National Guard to arrest law enforcement. And now you have law enforcement and sheriffs saying, well, guess what? We're just going to deputize everybody, give them all concealed carry permits. And now you have one county that's saying, we're going to form a militia to protect our sheriffs in the event that the state does try and arrest them or have the National Guard come in. Holy crap.
It's definitely a difficult narrative that's coming to play in Virginia. And when you look across the nation, there are certainly other sheriffs who have come out and been blatantly outspoken saying that, these red flag laws are a blatant disregard for the Constitution. So what we have here is we have a crossroads coming up where we have one side of the country believing that red flag laws are going to be a benefit to society, and the other side saying absolutely not. You're not going to infringe on my constitutional rights. There's got to be a middle ground somewhere. And I know we've talked about it. There is some benefit to the mental health aspect of red flag laws. When you consider somebody who should not have possession of firearms due to a mental incapacitation or a mental state that they shouldn't have the ability to take another life, take their own life, and law enforcement can now take that card out of play.
But that's been in place for long before red flag laws, right? Like
in some states.
If you knew you had a threat, an active threat, a guy who said, I'm going to murder you, and you know he has a firearm, there have been steps that you could take as a law enforcement officer working within the courts to take that threat off the street. Mm-hmm. But now what we're saying, and everything is great in a utopian society, right? Where, legislation gets passed and it would never be taken advantage of. But in states like Connecticut or states like Virginia with incoming lawmakers that are clearly anti-gun, the interpretation component is what is going to destroy the constitutional values that these laws are supposed to be founded on. And that is a scary proposition, especially considering these lawmakers are now proposing legislation in Virginia that leaves open to interpretation that if you are training your kid on rifle hunting, if you are practicing Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, any other forms of martial arts, it leaves wide open the interpretation to say that you are now a felon for doing that. And I think that's the problem that we face. And everyone talks about Trump and a constitutional crisis, but a true constitutional crisis is passing unconstitutional laws and then forcing the law enforcement officers on the street to enforce things that are questionably illegal to begin with. How do you make a determination as to what's right and wrong?
It's a difficult thing for law enforcement officers to look at something that's put in place by a legislature and then be tasked with enforcing it. However, I do believe that law enforcement officers today, they have a lot of different roles. We enforce the laws. In some ways, we're social workers. In some ways, we're mental health workers. And all these things kind of combine together when you're talking about red flag laws. But I think there's a sensible middle ground that we need to get to, because there's a lot. Again, we don't want to create this massive divide, which now is getting people to gather together and say that they're going to stand up and have to defend their sheriffs, have to defend their law enforcement officers from the state of Virginia, who now wants to go in and force them to do the things that the legislature is now wanting to do. There's got to be some communication between these two sides. And
well, let's talk about officer discretion too, right?
Yep.
So if you have an 11-year-old kid, you get a call about someone with a gun, and an 11-year-old kid points a gun at your head. Now, legally, you're presumably justified in killing that person, correct?
Depending on the circumstances.
However, officer discretion may allow that officer to end that threat in other ways. It might sound like a ridiculous analogy, but I think it's important to realize that just because you are backed by the law to do something doesn't necessarily make it the ethical thing to do or the only option. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So talk to me a little bit about the need to continue to protect the discretion of the officer.
Yeah, discretion is an important part of law enforcement, because there are instances where absolutely having to arrest somebody may not be beneficial for the person, for society as a whole. When you look at some of the laws on the books that mandate arrests, certainly probable cause in a family violence situation and having a mandated arrest puts that person in front of a judge and allows the courts to have some impact on preventing future instances of family violence. But certainly officer discretion on a traffic stop. You make a traffic stop for a speeding violation and it's an 82-year-old woman who just wasn't paying attention to the 25-mile-an-hour road sign as she was on her way to her doctor's. Certainly mandating that we give her a $300 fine isn't something that is going to be beneficial to society. So it gives law enforcement the ability to be creative with the way we kind of structure how to go about giving somebody consequences when you're talking about juveniles. Certainly putting a juvenile into the criminal justice system may not be needed in certain situations. So it allows us to be creative with the way we're doing things. However, it also gives officers the ability to say, I don't believe that this law applies in this situation, so I'm going to use my discretion and come up with a different way of doing things. Now, I don't know if that's going to cross over into the way that Virginia is trying to put red flag laws into order there, but certainly it is an aspect of law enforcement that needs to be considered when you talk about law enforcement being tasked with enforcing this law. Is it a mandated arrest? Is it a mandated, we're going to seize those guns? What is it?
That's going to do it for this edition of Law Enforcement Today. We thank you all for watching. We ask you all to be safe out there and to continue to pray for the officers who have been killed or wounded in the line of duty. As always, we end this episode with Dave Ray's Last Call, with the faces of those we've lost so far in 2019. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for hitting that share button. God bless America.
Man down, I'm bleeding out. There's no time, so please hear me out. These are the last few words that I'd like to say to you. her for those long, hard years that we tried to get it right. And tell her I'll be waiting after she makes it through it all. This is my last call. But ask her to forgive me. And tell her I'm sorry. That I can't be the man that she's gonna need. Tell her I'll be waiting where the winter meets the fall. This is my last call. And tell my children that I love them. Oh yeah, that daddy always loved them so. And tell them to hold their mother tight and to never let her go. And tell them I'll always be watching, looking over them through it all. This is my last call. But tell him to fight for me. Do what's right for me. Choose the light for me. But don't ever forget me. Tell them I'll always be watching, and I'll be there when they fall. This is my last call. For those who served beside me and who held that thin blue line, stand tall, stand strong, and hold your head up high. I'm sorry I let you down today, but please know I gave my all. This is my last call. So raise a glass for me. And kick some ass for me. Ring a bell for me. Send 'em straight to hell for me. I'd like to think I saved a few good lives, but I couldn't save them all. This is my last call. Yeah, I'd like to think I saved a few good lives, but I couldn't save my own. This is my last call.